Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. The title of this episode of my podcast is Palestine from the River to the Sea. Some people mean that literally. Others mean it metaphorically. I mean it literally. Very literally. And I will not apologize for meaning it very literally. In other words, let's start with those who mean it metaphorically. Many of them are basically just talking about Palestinian rights and that Palestinians should be permitted to live from the river to the sea. Not that Israelis or even Israel would cease to exist. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No. No. Israel cannot exist. And I do not mean it in a metaphorical way. When I say Palestine from the river to the sea, I am talking about Palestine and only Palestine from the river to the sea. Should Israelis be allowed to remain in that Palestine? Well, in my view, that decision should be left to the Palestinians, the indigenous inhabitants of Palestine. They are the ones who get to make that decision. Not you, not me, and certainly not the Israelis. You know, sometimes I think that I am less merciful than Hamas. I really do, because I know that Hamas is not opposed to an Israel in principle. At least that's my understanding. But it wants a state. I am opposed to an Israel in principle. There never should have been an Israel on Palestinian soil, on indigenous soil. As a Maoist third worldist, I am also an indigenist. I believe in indigenous rights. I believe that the indigenous people own the land. They are the caretakers of the land. They are the ones who get to decide who should live on that land, not the colonialists, not the Americans, not the Israelis, not the Germans, and not the French. Only the Palestinians should get to make that choice. And when I see the way in which Israel has been treating those colonialists, I'm sorry, those Palestinians, it is hard for me to have mercy on those colonialists. Really, really hard. And I have no mercy on them. Maybe God does. In that case, I will bow to his will. But after all that Israel has done to the Palestinians, my view is that the Israeli inhabitants, well, more specifically, the Jewish Israeli inhabitants of Israel, should leave Israel and go someplace else. Go back to your lands. Go back to Europe. Go back to the Americas. Go back to Asia. Go back to Africa. Wherever you came from, return to that place. Do not stay in Palestine. You have forfeited your right to be in Palestine. You have slaughtered innocent people, babies in incubators. From my perspective, no Israelis should remain in Palestine. I don't care about your homes. Leave them. Leave them there. Take your belongings with you, as many as you can, and go back home. Go back to your colonial lands. Leave the indigenous people of Palestine to themselves. They deserve to be free. And you, Israelis, you Americans, and I know I am one of them, are the ones who have enslaved them, are the ones who have imprisoned them. And so you, by my judgment, you Israelis should leave, preferably now. Preferably now. If not, I hope you are forced out by some means that I don't know. But I hope that you are forced to leave a land that you have stolen from the indigenous people of Palestine. And that is not you, Israelis. You have no claim on the land except in myth and folklore. That is your claim. No historical evidence for it. Purely fantasy, purely fiction. I don't even know if there was ever a Jewish land. Maybe there was. I am not a Jewish scholar, a Jewish studies scholar. The only person I ever met, to be honest, who claimed to be a Jewish studies scholar was a person on Paltalk who went by the username of Seventh Beggar. What Seventh Beggar did not know is that I knew who he was. He was an FBI agent looking for quote unquote Muslim terrorists. Whenever I saw him in the room, and he was in the room a lot, I would think to myself, is he trying to capture people in Hamas? After all, the US views Hamas incorrectly, but nonetheless, the US views Hamas as a terrorist group, which it definitely and most certainly is not. The US is a terrorist state. Israel is a terrorist state. Seventh Beggar, you are or you were a terrorist. You were a terrorist to me, personally. Personally. You wanted to check up on me because I didn't toe the American line. And so you asked for my phone number. You, who pretended to be a Ph.D. student in Jewish studies, called me a community college professor to find an article, to see if that article was on my server. Do you think that I am an idiot? Why would a Jewish studies student at a university call a professor at a community college to find an article on a community college server? I already knew before you called me who you were. All of us knew who you were. There were a number of you in the room, and we had your names. We had your names. We didn't tell you, but if you're watching this podcast now you know. Those of us, at least, who you may think did not know, we knew. We knew. I made a point of spreading around who you were to everyone I met. But I advised them to keep quiet. Remember Gus? Remember Gus. Remember Gus. He is deceased now. He knew who you were. You did not know that he knew who you were, but he did. A Jewish studies student. In reality, an FBI agent trying to find Muslim terrorists when the United States is the biggest terrorist country of them all. What total and complete hypocrisy. How dare you? How dare you enter that room? Sadly, I did not have the authority to make you leave. I was a super administrator. So were you. The owner of the room tolerated you, let you stay there, and he knew who you were too. Why he tolerated you, I don't know. I guess his views were different than mine. But I always knew who you were. Always, seventh beggar. So why do I mention seventh beggar? A person whom I have not had contact with in about a dozen years on Pal Talk, to indicate the state terrorism which is practiced by the United States, which is practiced by Israel, and seventh beggar is one of the agents, one of the instruments of that terrorism. Maybe he's retired now. I don't know. Possible. I know, for instance, that he was not even Jewish. He was a Mormon. That's okay. I mean, I know about Mormonism. I know of your shared history with the KKK. Yes, I do. But in spite of that, I have nothing against Mormonism per se. Most Mormons are unaware of that connection. And most Mormons I have known are decent people. And so perhaps aside from your role as an FBI agent, you were in ordinary life a decent person too. I don't know. But you lied to me. You presented yourself as a Jewish studies Ph.D. student, wanting my phone number to find that article, when you could have found that perfectly well on your own. Did you think that I was a fool? That I would not know what you were doing? Apparently, apparently, but I am no fool. I knew before you called me who you were. And I will remember you for the rest of my life, however long that may be. I know that after the owner of that room shut the room down, that you opened a room of your own. See? I have connections, and I haven't been back on Pal Talk since I left, but I know that you opened a room of your own to engage in continuing spying on alleged Muslim terrorists, perhaps people in Hamas, an organization which I love, which is not a terrorist organization, which is the legitimately elected government of the Gazans, and which should be respected as such, just as Palestine should be among the family of nations, and the land of Israel should be consigned to the dust. Will that happen? Oh, I hope so. I really hope so. I am not optimistic about it, but I hope so. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and a better day tomorrow.